Semantics. Semantics is the next, probably the last layer, and we could do an entire lecture on semantics of how we garner meaning from the systems that are there. I want to show you a person because I'd like to talk about him just so that you see him, because it's hard to really look at language without looking at this philosopher. This is Nelson Goodman. He's an American philosopher, and he felt that to understand a work of art, it was a matter of interpreting it correctly and looking. He thought that art was, these were symbol systems, that they were languages, and that all the keys to understanding the languages were there in the language itself. Yeah, and that's kind of a fascinating thing. He wrote a great book called Languages of Art. Yeah, so I encourage you in your own study to look up his book and look up Nelson Goodman. But Nelson Goodman, American philosopher, Languages of Art. Okay, let's look at syntax and what syntax, or sorry, not syntax, semantics. What do semantics mean? So semantics is the final element of language. It's once we join these things together, what it ends up meaning. So you've seen that here in this picture, each of these bubbles is a word. It's a symbol. And the symbols go together in a specific way. That is the syntax. And once we put it together, this is how we garner the meaning of it, is the semantics. It's the meaning of all these things, of how they're joined, what they mean. So we looked at these kinds of semantics where, you know, the cat is nice, touch cat soft, look at the nice cat, your cat's the softest and nicest cat in the world, and the word cat is not a cat, but is a furry whiskered quadruped. Okay, so we looked at those things, and you can see that the semantics, the meaning, gets deeper and deeper, and as the syntax also gets more complex in pieces like this. Okay, here's another person let's look at. This is Ferdinand Saussure. He's a structuralist. We're going to look at what structuralism is when we get to postmodernism. But he studied languages, and he believed that languages were these self-contained systems with rules and regulations. Yeah, so Ferdinand Saussure, linguist. Yeah, that each language system had its rules. So what he said that a language was is there's a signifier, which is often the word, and then this is linked with a mental concept, yeah, for what it means. So let's use this as an example. Let me grab it off my desk here. Here, I'll show you. These are kind of fun. These are actually puzzles. They have funny ways of coming together. But if we look at this, you know, let me show you the difference between this and this here. So someone would say that's the king, and this is the pawn. Okay, now if you have never seen a chess set before, you would recognize things that well, there's only one king on each side of a specific color, yeah, but there's multiple pawns. So if we look at what does a pawn mean, all right, if I ask you that question, when I ask classes that, they'll tell me different things about that. Well, there's multiple. They're the people. They're the ones in the trenches. They do the most movement of the work. They're also the most expendable in a game. So that you lose if you lose this king, but you can lose many pawns, and sometimes you will put them in places to allow them to get taken. So that this gets saved and ultimately it wins. And this moves in a specific way, this moves in a specific way, as does the queen. They all move very differently on the board. So they can move further. The rook always moves in a diagonal and can move multiple places. Sorry, not the rook, the bishop. Yeah. So anyways, and again, that's cool to me, this idea that what does this signify, this pawn? Now, when I was looking up pawn on the internet, I found that someone did this little picture where they took this chess set, they drew a picture, an arrow to the pawn, and then they wrote the word you. Now, this is a mini language system with a kind of semantics. The semantics, the syntax is pretty easy. They just pointed an arrow and wrote the word you. But what this is saying is you are a pawn. And what does that mean? Well, it gets back to what is a pawn? The pawn, so maybe this is like you're expendable. Maybe that this has meanings that, you know, you're not the king of the kingdom here or the queen of the kingdom. You're just one of the pawns. So maybe this person is communicating, don't be that. Don't be a pawn. Be the most important one. So anyways, there's something about that that's fascinating. And there's even a science of symbols called semiotics, yeah, that one can study the various symbols in the world and how symbols and symbol systems are used. Here's another one. I find this one also highly fascinating. If I show you this, there isn't a single person who looks at this that does not see a little stick figure. Yeah, everyone will say, see a little person here. There isn't often anyone who looks at that and sees, oh, this is a circle and 5 lines. Doesn't happen. Instead, suddenly we can identify that circle as a head. We see a spine, and we see the 2 arms. We see that these 5 lines represent a human body. Yeah. Much in the same way, if I show you this picture, you suddenly can say, oh, this is a stick figure taking a deep plie. If you're a dancer, you can say, oh, he's doing this little figure, they're doing a plie in second position. Yeah. So that because we know that position when the feet are apart on that plane is called second position. So here's a plie and a jump. All right. Someone that didn't know the plie and the jump term might just simply say, this is just, they would call this a figure. This is signifies a person jumping. This is 3 steps. Yeah. If any of you have ever illustrated something to show steps, I illustrated an exercise, a series of exercises once. Really difficult because you had to show 1, 2, 3, and you had to show it in an order so that someone looking at it would be able to follow the movement, you know, because you weren't showing a video. Yeah. So anyways, really interesting in that ability, but that this is communicating a jump. So semantics are kind of vital and important of once we put things together, what do they ultimately mean? And that's a fascination. You know, if we looked at several pieces of choreography, there's, I would say you would be looking at multiple layers. You would see people that have found really interesting symbols, these movements, these vocabulary pieces. Then you would find people that have found really interesting semantics, how they put those together. And then some will get to that last layer of like when they put these things together, oh, the meanings that come from it, what it can possibly mean is quite vital and interesting and fascinating. So that's a fascination. And ultimately, I think what we do as choreographers, or what we do as artists, is we want to find works that just simply work. You know, that they're like that. They just come together and you say, that's great, and that is really cool, and the meaning of it's cool. You know, it's cool on every level. And I often think works of art do that. Yeah, great works of art. That's what we look for, is that. And I would say the most profound works of art, they just do this in amazing ways, in ways that it takes us decades. We can go into museums later and later and later. Each and every time we see more meaning in the work. There's something really deep and rich about it. So anyway, that's semantics. It's amazing how things come together and the meanings we get from them.